My son-in-law Clifford Marsh bought himself a $22,000 fishing boat last spring. Custom hull, GPS navigation system, the whole thing. He named it after my daughter. I found out because Lorraine mentioned it at Sunday dinner, proud as anything, like I was supposed to be impressed. Clifford's been working so hard, she said. He deserved something for himself. I nodded. I passed the potatoes. What I didn't say, what I'd been sitting on for 6 months by then, was that the down payment on that boat came out of the joint account I had set up with my daughter when her mother passed. $42,000 I had transferred to help Lorraine and Clifford buy their first home in Barrie. Not a loan. A gift. Because that's what you do. Because Eleanor would have wanted that. Because Lorraine is my only daughter and I was 63 years old and I thought, what am I saving it for? That was 2 years before the boat. I want to tell you about the other gift first, though. The one I got. Last Father's Day, Lorraine handed me a card at the door. Clifford didn't come inside. He stayed in the truck, engine running, because they had plans. The card had a loon on the front, you know the kind, generic Canadian wildlife, 5 for $10 at Shoppers. Inside, Lorraine had written, Happy Father's Day, Dad. Hope you have a nice one. That was it. 12 words, no visit, no dinner. Clifford had plans. Clifford always had plans. I stood at the door of the house I'd lived in for 31 years and watched their truck back out of my driveway, and I thought, something is very wrong. Not just with Father's Day, with all of it. I'm going to tell you what I did about it. But first I need you to understand who Clifford Marsh is, because if I just say my son-in-law did something terrible, you'll picture a certain kind of man. Loud, obvious. The kind you can see coming. Clifford isn't that. Clifford Marsh is the kind of man who volunteers to bring the extra chairs when the family gets together. He fixes things when you ask him. He laughs at the right moments. He calls me sir, always has. And there's something in it that feels respectful until you realize you've never once felt respected. He married Lorraine 11 years ago. She was 31, he was 35. I liked him fine at the wedding. Eleanor liked him fine. He worked in commercial property management and made decent money. And he seemed steady. That's what I wanted for Lorraine. Steady. What I didn't know, what none of us knew, was that Clifford's idea of steady meant Lorraine would manage the household, manage the finances, manage the social calendar, manage the kids, and manage Clifford's mother every second Sunday, while Clifford managed to take every good thing my daughter built and quietly make it his. Eleanor saw it before I did. In her last year, she said to me, Something's off with that man, Walter. I can't name it. But watch him. I told her she was being protective. I told her Lorraine was happy. I was wrong on both counts. Eleanor passed in the winter 4 years ago now. Pancreatic cancer. 8 weeks from diagnosis to gone. The fastest, cruelest thing I've ever witnessed, and I say that as a man who spent 30 years in emergency medicine. You think you know what dying looks like, you don't. Not when it's your wife. The $42,000 I gave Lorraine and Clifford, I transferred it 3 months after Eleanor died. I was in that particular fog of early grief, where you make decisions that feel generous and right, and sometimes they are, and sometimes you're just trying to feel like you still have a family. Lorraine cried when I told her. Clifford shook my hand. He shook my hand. The money was supposed to be for the down payment on a house in Barrie, where Lorraine wanted to raise the grandkids closer to her friends from university. They bought the house. Nice place on a quiet fright street near Kempenfelt Bay. I helped them move in. I built a raised garden bed in the backyard with my grandson Teddy, who was 4 at the time and very serious about tomatoes. What I didn't know was that 6 months later Clifford refinanced. I'm not a financial expert. I'm a retired emergency physician. But I have a friend named Doug who spent 30 years as a mortgage broker, and when I mentioned offhandedly that Clifford had said something about restructuring their equity, Doug went very quiet. Did Lorraine sign off on that? He asked. I didn't know. I assumed she had. She hadn't fully understood what she was signing is what she told me later, much later. Clifford had explained it as a routine thing. Lower interest rate, better terms. She trusted him. He had pulled $60,000 in home equity and it had gone where? That's what I wanted to know. That's what I started trying to figure out, sitting alone in my house in Aurelia, in the evenings after the news. I want to pause here, because I know what some of you are thinking. Why didn't you just ask him directly, or why didn't you ask Lorraine? I'll tell you why. Because I had asked Lorraine once, gently, about money, about whether things were okay, and she had gone distant for 3 weeks. Didn't call, canceled a Sunday visit. And Clifford had called me instead, smooth as anything, and said he was a little concerned about how much I was inserting myself into their household decisions. Said it respectfully. Said it like he was doing me a favor by telling me. After that call I sat in my kitchen for a long time. I understood then what Eleanor had meant. You can't name it, but you feel it. The way a door closes that you didn't see close. So I didn't ask directly. I started paying attention instead. Over the next 8 months, I paid attention to what Lorraine mentioned and what she didn't. I paid attention to the things that appeared. The boat, a new truck for Clifford, a golf membership at a club in Innisfil, and the things that disappeared, like Lorraine's mentions of her pottery class, which she'd loved, and then just stopped taking, and then stopped mentioning. I paid attention to the way my daughter looked when she didn't think anyone was watching her. She looked tired in a way that had nothing to do with the kids. I have a neighbor, Patricia, who used to work in family law. We'd had coffee a few times since Eleanor passed. She'd been widowed herself years before, and one afternoon in February I told her what I'd been noticing. Not everything. Some of it. Patricia set down her mug and said, "Walter, what you're describing has a name." She didn't diagnose anything. She's not that kind of lawyer anymore. But she pointed me towards some reading, and she mentioned a few people I might speak with confidentially. And she said something I've thought about almost every day since. The hardest part for the children of these situations is that by the time they see it clearly, they've been inside it so long they think it's just how things are. I thought about Lorraine saying Clifford's been working so hard while he idled in the truck on Father's Day. I made an appointment with a lawyer the following week. Not about Lorraine's marriage. I'm her father, not her husband. I understand the limits of what I can do. But about me. About the $42,000. And whether there was anything legal I could do to protect my daughter's interest in that money, or in any future support I might provide. The lawyer, a woman named Sandra who had an office above a Tim Hortons on Mississauga Street, told me the civil route was nearly impossible given it was a gift. But she told me other things too. She told me to document everything I knew. She told me to make sure my own estate documents were airtight, because if I passed without specific conditions, anything I left to Lorraine could be absorbed. She told me to think carefully about whether Lorraine herself knew the full picture. Has she ever indicated she might want to leave? Sandra asked. No, I said, but she stopped talking about things she loves. Sandra nodded slowly, like that answer said more than a direct one would have. I went home and I started writing things down, not dramatically. I'm not a dramatic man. I'm a man who spent decades writing clinical notes, patient histories, carefully worded observations. I applied the same approach. Dates, amounts I could recall. Things Lorraine had mentioned, things she'd stopped mentioning, the refinancing, the boat, the golf membership, the truck. I also called my financial advisor and quietly restructured how any inheritance would flow, adding conditions that would keep funds in a protected trust rather than a joint account. It wasn't much. I'm comfortable but not wealthy. But it was what I could do, and then I waited, because there was nothing else to do. You can't force your daughter to see something she's not ready to see. Any parent will tell you that. Any parent who's told the truth will tell you it's the hardest thing about loving someone. Knowing that the only door that opens from the inside. The thing that finally opened the door wasn't me. It was a woman named Claire Hendricks. I didn't know Claire Hendricks existed until Lorraine called me on a Thursday evening in October, and her voice was the voice of someone who'd been crying for hours but had run out of tears. The specific flatness of it. I know that voice. I've heard it in emergency rooms. Dad, she said, I need to tell you something. She'd found messages. On a second phone she hadn't known about, she'd found it in the inside pocket of a jacket she was taking to the dry cleaner. Claire Hendricks was not a random name. Claire Hendricks was the office manager at the property management firm where Clifford worked. They had been together, from what Lorraine could piece together, for somewhere between 14 and 18 months. There were also financial records on that phone. Screenshots. Clifford had been sending himself documentation. Receipts. A transaction record from an account Lorraine didn't know existed. Whether he was careless or arrogant, I still don't know. Probably both. The boat had been paid for partly with cash withdrawn in increments of under $10,000 over 14 months. When Lorraine told me that, something in me went very still, not angry, still. Like the moment in a code when everyone stops moving and you know exactly what the next 10 minutes are going to look like. Lorraine, I said, listen to me, don't confront him tonight. She was quiet. I know that's not what you want to hear. I know everything in you wants to walk downstairs and... He's not home, she said. He told me he had a client dinner. Of course he did. I told her to take photos of everything on that phone before she put it back. I told her to call a family lawyer first thing in the morning. Not Sandra, who does estate work, but a proper family lawyer. And to do it from her cell, not the home phone, and not from the house Wi-Fi. I told her I would be there by 9 in the morning. I drove to Barrie that night anyway. I couldn't sleep. I parked outside the house and I sat in the car for a while, watching the lights, and I thought about Eleanor and what she would have said. I think she would have said I told you so, and then she would have made Lorraine a tea and sat with her until morning. She was practical like that. She grieved and then she moved. I'm trying to learn that from her still. Lorraine opened the door when she saw my headlights. She looked like she'd been hollowed out. The kids were asleep. Teddy was 6 now, and the baby Margot was almost 2. Lorraine sat at the kitchen table with her hands around a mug, and she said, very quietly, I knew something was wrong. I kept thinking it was me. That's the thing that broke my heart. Not Clifford Marsh and his boat and his secret phone and his Claire Hendricks. That sentence. I kept thinking it was me. I sat with her until about 2 in the morning. Then I drove to a hotel on Bayfield Street, and I slept for 4 hours, and I was back at 8:30 with coffee and a bag of her favorite bagels from the place on Dunlop, the one she'd loved since university. The family lawyer Lorraine called was named Audrey, and she was exactly the kind of woman you want in your corner when everything is on fire. Methodical, calm. She didn't say anything dramatic. She asked careful questions, and she listened to the answers, and at the end she said, You have more than you think. There was the refinancing without Lorraine's full informed consent. There was the undisclosed account. There was the cash withdrawal pattern, which Audrey said a forensic accountant would want to look at. There were the messages which established both the affair and, more importantly for financial purposes, the deliberate concealment of assets. This is going to take time, Audrey said. But the position is strong. Lorraine nodded like someone absorbing information in a state of shock, which is exactly what she was doing. Clifford came home that evening to find Audrey's card on the kitchen counter, and Lorraine sitting at the table with me. He did something I hadn't expected. He was completely calm. He said hello to me. He asked if there was dinner. Lorraine said nothing. I said nothing. He looked at the card. He picked it up. He set it back down. I see, he said. Then he went upstairs. He called his own lawyer the next morning. That's when it stopped being calm. I'm not going to walk you through every detail of the next 8 months, because some of it is still being sorted and some of it belongs to Lorraine, not to me. But I'll tell you the shape of it. The forensic accountant found discrepancies going back almost 4 years. Not enormous amounts individually. Clifford was careful that way. But cumulatively between the equity withdrawal, the undisclosed account, and what the accountant described as personal expenditures mischaracterized as business expenses, it came to somewhere in the range of $90,000 that had moved through the marriage without Lorraine's knowledge. The boat is being sold as part of the asset division. Clifford didn't get to name it after my daughter and keep it. Claire Hendricks, it turned out, had no idea Clifford was married with children. When she found out because Lorraine's lawyer contacted her firm as part of the process. She ended things immediately and filed a complaint with HR about the misuse of company resources that had apparently also been occurring. Clifford was placed on administrative leave pending review. I don't take pleasure in that exactly, but I'd be lying if I said I felt nothing. The harder part, the part nobody tells you about when you imagine this kind of story, is Lorraine herself. Because my daughter is not a woman who falls apart. She's a woman who holds everything together so long that when it finally does break, she doesn't know what to do with her own hands. She'd been managing that household and those children and her own quietly eroding sense of herself for 11 years, and now she had to figure out who she was without the weight of all that management. She started back at pottery in January, a Thursday evening class in Barrie. She texted me a photo of the first bowl she made, lopsided, beautiful, glazed in a kind of burnt orange that Eleanor would have loved. I put it on my kitchen windowsill. Teddy knows his parents aren't together anymore. We haven't told him much beyond that. Kids understand more than you explain and less than you think, in my experience. He's angry sometimes and fine other times. He's 7. He's resilient in the way that children are resilient, which is to say he needs a lot of consistent ordinary love and he'll be okay. Margot is too young to understand. She'll grow up not knowing a version of her family that included Clifford Marsh at Sunday dinners. I don't know yet whether that's a loss or a mercy. Probably both in different proportions at different ages. Here's what I want to say to you. If you're a father or a grandfather watching this, and something about what I've described feels familiar, pay attention. Not in a suspicious way, not in a way that makes your child feel surveilled, but pay attention the way you would pay attention to any patient who comes in looking wrong in a way you can't quite name yet. Something in the presentation is off. The story doesn't quite fit the symptoms. You don't dismiss that feeling. You keep looking. And when they finally tell you, because they will, eventually, they always do, don't say I told you so. Don't say I knew something was wrong. Just be there. Drive through the night if you have to. Show up with coffee and their favorite bagels and sit at the kitchen table until 2 in the morning, and don't say a single thing that makes it about you. I spent 40 years in medicine because I believed that showing up mattered, that being present in the worst moments of someone's life was its own kind of intervention. You can't always fix what's broken, but you can make sure nobody goes through it alone. That's still what I believe. Probably more now than before. The last time Clifford Marsh called me, this was about 4 months ago. He said he thought we could handle things like reasonable men. He said he hoped there were no hard feelings. He said, "You know how these things go, sir." I said I did know how these things go. And then I said goodbye and I didn't answer when he called again. Lorraine is looking at apartments. There's one near a park with a good school for Teddy, and a community center with a pottery studio 2 blocks away. She sent me the listing with 3 question marks, and I sent back a thumbs up, which is about as effusive as I get over text. She's going to be okay. I'm not saying that the way people say it when they don't know. I'm saying it because I've watched her over these last several months, in the middle of the hardest year of her adult life. And I've seen her get up every morning and make breakfast for her kids, and show up to the things that matter and laugh. Sometimes, at things that are actually funny. That's her mother in her. The part that grieves and then moves. The burnt orange bowl is still on my windowsill. I look at it every morning with my coffee. Eleanor would have said it was a bit lopsided. She would have said it in a way that meant she loved it. Some things you hold on to, not because they're perfect, because they're true.